Hate, and Propaganda, a 6-part series with George Stroumboulopoulos. 70 years later, why World War II still matters.
If you knew your government was not telling the truth, would you speak up? Because in wartime, that's what civilians, soldiers, and politicians all face. When is it better to just keep quiet? Ever? The pressure to suppress the whole truth in World War II was intense. There were the attempts to cover up facts in Russia and France, and the story of Dieppe and what happened to Canadian soldiers when a propaganda campaign and a military campaign went wrong in a time of love, hate, and propaganda.
August 19th, 1942. It's one of the war's most secret secrets. Only when the troops are actually on board their ships is the operation revealed. 250 ships, 6,000 soldiers, 5,000 of them Canadians. Their mission, cross the English Channel to France and attack the heavily fortified port of Dieppe. Some believe the operation is doomed right from the start.
The British are in command of the raid, and they're determined it's going to be a success no matter what happens. Everyone is desperate for some good news.
Because for the Allies, the summer of '42 is all bad news. Japan has conquered much of the Pacific. Hitler's army occupies most of Western Europe and is now attacking Russia. Russian dictator Joseph Stalin puts pressure on Winston Churchill to attack Hitler and force him into a fight on 2 fronts. Enter Lord Louis Mountbatten, young, ambitious, and a favorite of Churchill. Seems he has all the right stuff to command a highly risky operation.
Churchill looked at him and saw a young man that was very dashing, a young man that maybe didn't have some of the same conventional restraints on him that older commanders would have.
However, the operation does not have unanimous support. A massive raid like this has never been tried before. And although Canadian troops have 2 years training under their belts, most have never seen actual combat. But that doesn't stop Mountbatten. He is determined the mission will be a success one way or another.
If the raid fails, they have a plan. Mountbatten and his staff have already decided what to tell the people, and it was all carefully drafted and written in advance.
And this is what they dream up. If the raid fails,
first, emphasize the success of the operation as an essential test in the use of substantial forces. Then put extremely heavy stress on stories of personal heroism, and focus public attention on bravery rather than objectives not attained.
To make sure the story is well covered, a bunch of reporters are attached to the troops. Today we would call them embedded journalists, but in those days they were issued a uniform and given a rank.
This quiet Canadian scooped the world 3 times.
28-year-old Canadian press correspondent Ross Monroe is pumped.
I was committed to the war completely and utterly right from the start. We felt that the Germans were going to wreck this world of ours, and that we would have to stop them. The troops were committed to it, and I think the correspondents were. I certainly was.
"29-year-old Dollard Menard is from Notre-Dame-du-Lac, Quebec. He's the youngest lieutenant colonel in the British Empire. Even so, experience tells him they're heading into a tough battle.
We knew from the start that it wouldn't be easy. The aerial photos taken by our reconnaissance aircraft had clearly shown that the beach was covered in barbed wire, parapets, and machine gun nests from left to right, which meant we'd face heavy fire.
At 4 a.m., the Allies land on the beaches of Dieppe. The Germans are ready and waiting, and their cameras are rolling. Minard can't believe his eyes.
We had no cover, nowhere to hide from enemy fire. We couldn't even retreat and go back out to sea. It was a death sentence. It was as if we were already dead, even before the enemy had killed us.
Correspondent Ross Monroe is lucky to get out alive.
I spent the grimmest 20 minutes of my life with one unit, when a rain of German machine gun fire wounded half the men in our boat, and only a miracle saved us from annihilation.
The Dieppe raid lasts 9 hours. You probably know the ending. It was a disaster. Over 900 Canadians dead. Almost 2,000 taken prisoner. Canadian losses outnumbered German losses by a staggering 10 to 1.
Of course, that's not how the story is told to the people back home. Remember, the official story had been pre-written by Mountbatten staff? Well, now those words are coming out of the mouths of the journalists covering the raid.
This is Rooney Peltier speaking to you from London. It's been a wonderful day, but I just have had handed to me the latest communique issued from Combined Operations Headquarters. Apart from the losses inflicted on the enemy, a vital experience has been gained in the development of... We've learned a most valuable lesson which may enable...
Costly as it has been to Canada,
The raid was definitely a success.
That's just the beginning. Newspapers back home, they keep the spin going for days.
The message that came out was that the raid was a success. It was believed by many that the town itself had been captured. It was portrayed in the communiques that they had landed basically according to plan and they withdrew according to plan.
However, as time passes, Mountbatten's cover-up starts to unravel. Rumors of the disaster echo across the Atlantic. Not surprisingly, journalists in Canada are asking questions. Like this one.
Can we be expected to know the truth and act upon it? If those who are our leaders keep the facts from us and try to feed us on sugar-coated stories.
And so with questions like that being asked, the second phase of the spin campaign is launched. Get the people who had been there at Dieppe out in public, telling tales of heroism.
Delard Menard, the young French-Canadian lieutenant colonel, is the only commanding officer to return home safely. He's been highly decorated for his bravery. Seeing a real war hero in the flesh helps keep the myth alive. And press correspondent Ross Monroe goes on a cross-country tour speaking to thousands at a time, praising the bravery of the Canadian boys at Dieppe.
Monroe was a connection between the event and the families in these communities he went to. And afterwards, according to news reports, Monroe was mobbed with people with questions.
It takes close to a month for those questions to be answered. When details are finally released on September 15th, the numbers of those killed and missing more than triple.
It was a shock to Canadian papers and to the Canadian public. As far as Canadian war news is concerned, I haven't seen any Canadian operations with the level of deception involved as the publicity for Dieppe.
But Mountbatten never flinches. He maintains that the raid has been a success.
For every one man who died at Dieppe, at least 10 or more were spared in the invasion of Normandy 2 years later.
And this may be the saddest part of all. Dieppe was supposed to be a propaganda victory for the Allies, but in the end, it's a propaganda victory for their enemy.
Bei diesem dilettantenhaften und jeder militärischen Vernunft hohen sprechenden Unternehmen, das allein politischen Zwecken dienen sollte, verlor der Feind neben seinen außerordentlich hohen blutigen Verlusten über 2100 Mann an Gefangenen. Der Aufsehen erregte
While the Nazis clearly win this round in the propaganda war, a major new player is about to enter the ring. One formidable opponent the Nazis hadn't counted on: Hollywood. The late 30s. The Depression is over, there's money to spend, and Americans are going to the movies at least once a week. War is the last thing on people's minds. For most Americans, it's somebody else's fight across the ocean.
Not all Americans felt the war was so far away. Two brothers from Hollywood, of all places, had been waging a propaganda campaign against Hitler for years.
The Warner brothers are the sons of a Jewish shoemaker who had fled persecution in Poland. So when Hitler came to power in 1933, Harry and Jack Warner could see the writing on the wall. They wasted no time spreading the word to Americans. The Nazis are a danger to everyone.
We Germans must make the United States unser America, our America.
Even before the war starts, Warner Brothers is on the attack. Confessions of a Nazi Spy warns Americans that Nazis are everywhere, including the US, and they plan on taking over the world. It's a daring move, a Hollywood first.
Warner Brothers had opened the floodgates for what would be a series of anti-Nazi films. That this is sort of was the first kind of landmark film that actually had the word Nazi right there in the title.
The Nazi Party has created a new fascist society based on a devout worship of the Aryan Superman.
To prove its point, the movie mixes fiction with Nazi newsreels. The message is loud and clear. Americans have to do something about the Nazis.
There are some who will say there is nothing to fear, that we are immune.
Warner Brothers' crusade against the Nazis angers a lot of people in Washington. Isolationists, those who want America to stay out of the war, point a finger at Warner Brothers and Hollywood, saying it's all propaganda and warmongering.
The debate came to a screeching halt with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. America was now at war. No question about it.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Japan is now an enemy. Germany and Italy soon follow. Americans are quick to react. GIs land on the beaches of Guadalcanal in the South Pacific. The fight to take the island from the Japanese is long, fierce, and cruel. Revenge is the order of the day.
Hey Joe, fry Jap going down.
The racist dialogue in movies like Warner Brothers' Air Force goes too far for Washington's taste.
To make sure Americans get the right messages, Washington creates the Office of War Information, and part of its job is to turn Hollywood into a great propaganda machine. Pretty much everything coming out of Tinseltown from now on has to be approved by the OWI.
Warner Brothers already has a head start. They put their studio to work on all fronts. Enlisted stars like Jimmy Stewart encourage other Americans to do the same.
We're all going to be in this war soon, sooner than a lot of you realize.
150,000 men enlist in the Air Force. The studio also makes films to promote rationing on the home front.
Place the war first. Expect to have to make adjustments. Make them. Observe rationing and price rules.
The Warners even get their cartoon characters to pitch in. And then there's the flag-waving spectacle, Jimmy Cagney in Yankee Doodle Dandy.
A real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July.
This little epic persuades Americans to buy war bonds to the tune of $15 million. By 1943, Warner Brothers is making movies hand in hand with Washington. Patriotism goes off the charts.
Warner Brothers were on a roll, but then they were given a new mission, a tougher one.
Look over there, my friends.
You see, America has a new ally with a notorious past. Joseph Stalin is now fighting alongside the USA. So, how do you get people to like him? Well, simple. Make a movie.
I believe, sir, that history will record you as a great builder for the benefit of mankind.
It is not my achievement, Mr. Davies.
Mission to Moscow is one of the weirdest of all Hollywood motion pictures of the Second World War. It shows Joseph Stalin, the genocidal mass murderer, as this avuncular figure who's is sort of like one of your uncles back home, a wise and kindly fellow.
Our 5-year plans were conceived by Lenin and carried out by the people themselves.
The results have been a revelation to me.
The movie is a whitewash designed to convince Americans that Stalin can be trusted. It conveniently forgets to mention that his rise to power was stained with the blood of millions of Soviet citizens.
Mission to Moscow is not just about persuasion, it's about revision. It's about making your point by systematically falsifying everything we know about the recent past. And I think out of all the wartime films, that's the one that probably Hollywood, in retrospect, is most ashamed of.
By 1943, just about every Hollywood studio is in the propaganda game. Movies have now become an essential tool in the fight against Hitler. Summer of 1942. German forces have been occupying Paris for 2 years. Food, clothing, even wine is scarce. Everything is rationed to feed Hitler's army. French authorities cooperate with the invaders, but it's an uneasy relationship to say the least. Most Parisians get on with their lives as best they can. But life under Nazi rule isn't exactly the same for everybody. Nazi propaganda is everywhere, and its target, the Jews. There's even an exhibition called Les Juifs et la France.
Tous les postes de commande de la Maison France se trouvaient entre les mains des Juifs. Ils ont conduit la France vers la plus totale défaite de son histoire.
The Juifs et la France, the exhibition opened in Paris, had one purpose. It was basically to make people understand that the Jews were not part of the society, that the Jews were racially different, that they had to be expelled, or that the country had to get rid of them.
To get rid of them, the German invaders start by creating new rules that gradually make life impossible for Jews. They have to register at the local police station. They cannot own a business or hold public office. Jews cannot own a radio, a bicycle, or a telephone. They cannot be seen in any public place. Sad to say, most Parisians just look the other way.
That summer, the Parisian police conducted a survey showing a general dislike of Jews, but also a growing unease with Nazi excesses.
The arrest of Jews in France had started a few months before. At first, only men over 18 not born in France were being taken and put on trains and sent to work camps. In June, another humiliating rule. All Jews over the age of 6 must wear a yellow star on the left side of their chest. Posters everywhere read, "Let us mark them, let us recognize them, the Jews that kill in the dark." Nazi propaganda is ramping up the hate campaign to a new level. Parisians are being primed for something big. And it is. The Nazis order the arrest of 22,000 Jews. The French police volunteer to conduct the raid across the city. Men, women, children, no one is spared. July 16th, 4 in the morning. The roundup begins.
Les Borocas, 6 rue de Gambé.
The French police have lists with names and addresses.
Les Schreiber, 14 rue Louis Bonnet. Les Gilbert, 15 rue de la Vieux-Ville.
Those arrested are given very little time to pack their things.
Les Correnbagère, 25 rue Bisson.
At 58 Rue du Mont, French police arrest 10-year-old Marie Chalin and her mother. Marie writes a quick note to her father, who'd been sent to a work camp.
Dear Papa, they are taking us to the Vélodrome d'Hiver, but don't write us now, because it's not sure that we are going to stay there. I give you a big kiss, and Mommy also, your little girl who always thinks of you. Marie.
Annette Monod, a social worker with the Red Cross, witnesses the raid.
It was French people making the arrests, and public transport was used. It wasn't something to be proud of. They made the arrests on German orders. They actually did the dirty work, making the arrests. I was French, therefore felt responsible for what French people did. And of course I was ashamed.
Just like Monod, many Parisians are stunned.
When at 5 in the morning, a French policeman comes to your building and arrests the family next door, and including children, including babies, you can see the difference between the message on the wall and the arrest of a child. How can a child be a danger for your own safety? The French population started to help, and little by little, this help saved many lives.
The Nazis had ordered the roundup of 22,000 Jews. In the end, 13,000 are actually arrested. Others escape, in part thanks to the help of outraged French citizens. Arrested families are taken to the Vélodrome d'Hiver, a stadium used for bike races and shows. 7,000 people are crammed into the building for 5 days. Nothing has been planned. No food, no water, no bathrooms, no beds. Those who try to escape are shot.
It was dreadful. The noise, the chaos, the dust, the moans, the cries, sick women shouting, crying in hysterics. It was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
Marie and her mother go from one nightmare to another. They're sent to a camp south of Paris. It's far too small and not meant to hold children. A few days later, Marie's mother is taken from her and put on a train bound for Auschwitz in Poland. Marie spends another month by herself at the camp. Although sick with scarlet fever, she manages to write a letter to her father.
My dear Papa, I would like, if you can, for you to send me my photo of Mommy and you. It's been so long since I last saw you. Try to get me out of here so that I could be with you. I'm losing all of my strength here. I've lost a lot of weight. I cry a lot when I think of you. Your little girl who loves you and kisses you, Marie.
Three days after writing that letter, Marie and the other children are crammed into a cattle car. Annette Monod witnesses the whole thing.
I remember it was already cold. A morning in late September or early October. That's when I saw the children being deported, with machine guns pointed at them. They were herded into cattle cars, and the doors were shut and sealed. I remember one little boy pushing his fingers through the slits, begging to get off. The train rolled away. The children were alone. The women had already been taken away.
It takes 2 days to get to Auschwitz. The moment she arrives, Marie is sent to the gas chamber. She was about to celebrate her 11th birthday. Marie-Jolaine perished along with 4,050 other children that had been rounded up in that raid. It's all part of the Third Reich's plan to exterminate all Jews. Their final solution. German propaganda had worked on the French for a while. But the arrest of women and children revealed the Nazis' true colors. In the spring of 1942, Hitler's army is on the march again in Russia. Winter had frozen his army to a standstill right on Moscow's doorstep. Now the Führer decides to send fresh troops south towards Stalingrad, the city that bears his arch-enemy's name. German soldiers are proud, confident, and eager to prove that the army of the Third Reich is invincible. Back home in Germany, theaters all across the country are showing their smiling faces. And on walls everywhere, Nazi posters promise, "We will be victorious." A German victory will free Europe. Stalingrad lies on a bend of the Volga River. The city is the industrial heart of the Soviet Empire, supplying much of Russia's military arsenal. Hitler expects to take Stalingrad in a matter of days.
Since 1941, he had promised the collapse of the Soviet Union. Stalingrad becomes almost that metaphor of the last remaining bastion of Soviet resistance to the onslaught of the Nazi regime.
In the year they'd been fighting, Stalin's army had been no match for Hitler's. Millions of Soviet soldiers had been taken prisoner. And confronted with this renewed assault, the Red Army is in full retreat.
Stalin has tried just about everything to keep his soldiers from running. He's appealed to their love of the motherland. He's created heroes and heroines to inspire them, but still, it's not enough. He has to find a way to turn things around, so he sends out a tough new message, a message that no one can ignore.
His written order states that it is time to finish retreating, not one step back. Russians must defend each position, each meter of their territory, up to the last drop of blood. Along with that message, Stalin also orders that there will be no evacuation of civilians. And any soldier caught retreating or surrendering will be shot. The German attack on Stalingrad begins with the bombing of the city. In 2 days, Stalingrad is turned into rubble. Thousands of Russian civilians are killed. Russian soldiers dig in. The battle that follows will be one of the fiercest and bloodiest of the entire war. News of the Russian resistance first reaches home through letters that slip through the censors. Heinz Becker, a 32-year-old father of 3, writes,
I would just like to know what kinds of troops these are to put up such a tenacious defense and bar us from making any further advances. We're sure to have 14 more days of work here in Stalingrad, on top of the 14 days we've already spent here.
Days become weeks. And back home, German newsreels can't hide the fierceness of the fighting.
Die Schlacht Stalingrad. Jedes Kellergewölbe, jeden Steinhaufen wird hier erbittert gekämpft. Dort hinten die Wolga. Diese wichtigste Lebensader der Sowjetunion ist jetzt abgeschnitten.
The battle drags on, another bitterly cold Russian winter. Once again, the Germans aren't prepared. On some days, combined casualties reach 6,000. Foot soldiers have now been fighting for 2 months. Spirits are sinking. German soldier Günter Koscharek writes,
We can't do anything, not a thing. The only solution might actually be to get out and run. But where? The only advantage is that death will come more quickly.
Back in Germany, Nazi propaganda keeps the idea of victory very much alive. In a Munich beer hall filled with Nazi diehards, Hitler declares that Stalingrad has been taken.
Wissen Sie, wir sind bescheiden. Wir haben ihn nämlich. Es sind nur ein paar ganz kleine Plätzchen noch da. Es kommt kein Schiff mehr die Wolga hoch. Das ist das Entscheidende.
However, not all Germans buy in. Ursula von Kardorff, a 31-year-old journalist, keeps count of the obituaries coming from the Russian front. Her brother Jürgen, a soldier, will soon leave to join the battle.
The last day of Jürgen's leave. In the evening, we heard from the British radio about the landings in North Africa. I suddenly realized that my brothers no longer believed that we should win the war.
So just days after von Kardorff wrote those words, in a massive push, the Russians surround the Germans. Now, the official Nazi line is things are going fine. But back home in Germany, rumors are rampant. Nazi propaganda just doesn't ring true anymore. The Third Reich can't keep claiming victory.
Confronted with the inevitability of German defeat,
the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, decides to put a lid on Stalingrad. No more mention of the battle would be made.
This is the mistake that Goebbels is making, because by eliminating any reference to Stalingrad, he gives the initiative to rumors, to foreign broadcasts, to, if you like, populate that space, to take up the role of the official propaganda. So the more the Nazi propaganda is trying to avoid talking about Stalingrad, the more the pessimism of the public is becoming deep.
Ursula von Kardorff's pessimism couldn't get any deeper.
Today in the Stadtbahn, we overtook a convoy train bound for the front. I suddenly hit the feeling that every turn of the wheels was bringing these soldiers closer to death. Painted in white lettering on the locomotive were the words, "These wheels are turning for victory." For death, I thought.
Surrounded by the Russian army, and now by a wall of silence, the once proud and invincible German soldiers are starving and freezing.
I had always hoped I'd be able to leave this vast eastern land for a short time, so that I could feel at least like a real person and see my family again for a few days. But there's little hope I will ever again return home in a healthy state, or even return home at all.
Those were Heinz Becker's last words. Three weeks later, the Germans surrender to the Russians in Stalingrad. 300,000 German soldiers had been killed in the battle. More than 100,000 taken prisoner. It is the first time an entire German army has been defeated. A story this big can't be kept secret. But Hitler refuses to be the bearer of bad news.
Hitler is, if you like, developing this phobia of appearing to the German people, or even addressing the German people, precisely because he does not have victories to report. In fact, it sets a pattern from 1943 onwards, towards the end of the war, where Hitler is increasingly more hesitant in terms of appearing in public.
So with Hitler keeping a low profile, it's up to Goebbels to face the German people with the truth, or at least Goebbels' version of the truth.
Die gewaltige Massenkundgebung im Berliner Sportpalast. Reichsminister Dr. Goebbels spricht. Erklärte.
In a speech that dramatically changes the message and the tone of Nazi propaganda, Goebbels resorts to fear. He spells out what defeat would mean.
Hinter den vorstürmenden Sowjetdivisionen sehen wir schon die jüdischen Liquidationskommandos. Hinter diesen aber hebt sich der Terror und das Gespenst des Millionenhungers und einer vollkommenen europäischen Anarchie.
Goebbels is trying to make sure that the German people understand that if the Bolsheviks come back, and the Jews, according to the Nazi propaganda and the Nazi slogan, if the Jews and the Bolsheviks win this war, their revenge will not be launched solely on the Nazi regime, but it will also be directed against the German people as a whole.
Seid ihr entschlossen, dem Führer in der Erkämpfung des Sieges durch dick und dünn und unter Aufnahme auf der schwersten persönlichen Belastungen zu folgen?
The frenzy surrounding Goebbels' speech soon reaches journalist Ursula von Kardorff.
Our reporter who was covering the meeting, a quiet, thoughtful man and anti-Nazi, told us how overly excited the audience was. He even caught himself jumping to his feet, and for 2 pins he too would have shouted. He sat down in a state of confusion. He said that if Goebbels had asked, "Do you all want to die?" they would have all shouted yes.
Wollt ihr den totalen Krieg? 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 Wollt ihr den tot
rapture is short-lived. Propaganda feeds off good news, and for Germany, there would be very little of that in 1943. The German army would again be humiliated by the Russians at the Battle of Kursk. In North Africa, Germans were swept out. In southern Italy, Canadian troops pushed the Germans out of the city of Ortona. And then there were the bombs, dropping like rain on every German city. War is no longer seen through newsreels, posters, or letters from the front. For all Germans, it's there, right on their doorstep. All that's left of Goebbels' message is the fear, and that's very real.